In this lesson, we're going to look at primary storage, and that includes memory. So the big question is describing the difference between RAM and ROM and how they work. And the small questions are explain the need for ROM, explain the need for RAM, what do you mean by virtual memory, how does RAM capacity affect performance, and what is the purpose of cache. So starting here, we got primary storage, and that includes cache, RAM, and ROM. And secondary storage includes all the non-volatile devices such as hard disk drive, solid state drive, flash memory sticks, and so on. Now RAM, this is the definition for RAM, which stands for random access memory. So in the exam you'll need to memorize this definition by heart. It's very, very important. So it's a temporary area of storage, which means it will lose its data when the computer turns off. So it's a temporary area for storage for programs that are currently running or that are being used. And that data is normally added to the RAM when you turn your computer on. And the first thing that is added to the RAM normally is the operating system because it loads first. So, properties of the RAM. The data is stored in the RAM while it's being used. When you turn your computer, everything is emptied out in the RAM. We call this volatile. So it requires electricity for it to save data or to store data. And a RAM can also read and write as well. So data inside the RAM does change. And it's very fast. So it's not as fast as cache, but it is very fast. Now, what happens when RAM is full? So imagine we're filling up our RAM with documents, Excel, Word, operating system, and a game, and so on. Now, once your RAM fills up, it starts using virtual memory. So virtual memory is part of the hard drive, and it is used as an extension to RAM, but only when RAM is full. The virtual memory is not used when the RAM is not full. So when the RAM is full, it starts using virtual memory, which can be found on the hard disk drive, which is that image right there at the top. Now, virtual memory is a type of memory that uses the hard disk drive. It is used as RAM, so as an extension to RAM when the RAM is full. And it is used to store the contents of RAM. So the way it works is task. So it takes the data from the RAM and it stores them on the hard disk drive until they're needed. When they're needed, it sends them back to the RAM. Then that will be fetched from by the CPU. But it always goes back to the RAM before it's processed and then to the CPU. The disadvantage of RAM is that it is very slow, so it makes the computer run slower because it has to continue to transfer instructions between the hard disk and RAM because we cannot process data in the virtual memory. The data has to go to the RAM and then from the RAM to the CPU for it to be processed or executed. So we say RAM is volatile. What is the purpose of RAM? Now, as I mentioned before, it's a temporary area of storage for programs that are currently being used and that are currently running. Now, the way RAM affects performance is if you increase the amount of RAM, this will technically increase your performance because you will have more space for more open programs. It means you can open more programs without the need to use virtual memory because remember, virtual memory is very slow. It will slow down your computer. So you will have more space for more open programs. However, if you've only opened a Word document or Google Chrome or something simple, then increasing the RAM will not really increase performance because the RAM will not be full anyways, so it will not use the virtual memory. But technically, if you increase it, so in the exam, if they say what happens when we increase the RAM, why does it affect performance? You always say yes, because you will have more space for more open programs and you won't need to use the virtual memory when it's full. Now, ROM is the second type of primary storage, and the purpose of ROM is to store the boot up programs, and that will start your computer. So we call it BIOS. It will start your computer. ROM is non-volatile, which means it does not lose its data when the computer is off, because if the boot up instructions is lost, then how are you going to turn your computer on? You won't be able to. So RAM stands for random access memory and ROM stands for read-only memory. So ROM can only read, it cannot write. So we went through all that. So RAM is volatile. So these are the differences between RAM and ROM. If they do ask you about the differences, the main difference is that RAM is volatile, ROM is non-volatile. RAM can also read and write, which means contents in the RAM can be altered. In the exam, if you just say RAM can read and write while ROM can only read, you won't get the full marks because you have to say what does that actually mean. And that means that the contents can be altered inside the RAM, new things are added, things get removed when you turn it off, and so on. But the ROM can only read, which means the contents never change, all the things inside the ROM stays the same. Okay, then we have cache. So cache can be a primary storage as well, and it's a very fast type of memory that is found inside the RAM. Inside the CPU, not the RAM. It is faster than RAM. However, it has very small quantity. Let's say about 128 megabyte, while RAM normally contains 16 gigabyte, which is about 16,000 megabyte. So the quantities, the capacity difference is huge between them. It's very fast, but it does not store much data. Now, the purpose of the cache is that it saves frequently used instruction. So instructions that you use a lot all the time, like Google Chrome, you have it open all the time. Sometimes it gets stored in the cache, so it can be accessed very fast because the CPU will execute the instructions. So instead of the CPU going all the way to the RAM and fetching it from the RAM, it's faster to fetch it directly from the cache because the cache is closer to the CPU, which means it will be fetched faster and executed faster. Now, increasing the cache will improve the performance because it is faster to transfer data to and from the cache than to transfer them from RAM. This also makes your CPU more efficient. Now, the differences in performance, so your cache, which is the fastest, then RAM and ROM, then solid state drive, and then hard disk drive. Hard disk drive is the slowest one, but hard disk drive can store the most amount of data. And that's everything that you need to know about RAM, ROM, and cache.